What was the hardest point?
Of on the road?
Yeah. Is there one specific moment?
I think it's just the hardest part. I remember waking up in a hotel room and just feeling like I didn't even know if I wanted to go out into the outside world. You know, I just wanted to kind of get through it at times because I was very exhausted and I just missed writing, missed being home, but that I felt so conflicted because this was supposedly what I wanted to do all these years.
Yeah.
So I was a man like living in fear of the real world. And I think I've gotten better at just kind of putting one foot in front of the other and just going outside. But for me, that was the hardest, was just feeling sort of trapped in this imaginary bubble of being in a tour bus or being in a hotel room, and just all we did was play a show, and that was all we did that day, you know, and interviews and things like that. But
was it the same for you too?
Yeah, it was a confusing feeling because it was like too much of a good thing, you know. You're like railing against something at times that is literally your dream, what you wanted, and then you got it. And you're like, well, what's wrong with this? And there's nothing wrong, but everything felt wrong at times, and it's elusive, you know. And I think not being able to write, and kind of, that was hard, like worrying that maybe that muscle was somehow going to atrophy. And
what did it do to you, to your relationship?
I felt like we were both in, you know, it's not, I would never compare it, you know, literally to war, but like it was almost like we were in these little foxholes, separate, and we were not really communicating. You know, it was like we were just surviving. You know, we just had our little rations and we were just eating, and then we would show up for shows, but I think there was a genuine struggle just to sort of keep our sanity and our wits about us. And then when we got off the road to sort of try to reconnect and get to know each other again, I was like, hey, I'm Wes. Hey, it's Jer. You know, it literally had to be done, and it was done mostly in the studio when we made the album.
But did you want to do it?
To reconnect, or?
Yeah, because sometimes people say, well,
I think it would be easier in some ways to just not.
Yeah.
Just to be like, well, this is what we've evolved to. This is now our relationship, is that there isn't one as much as there used to be. And so I think it took a lot of effort. It felt like, and to make sort of light of it, it kind of felt like, you know, when you get a flat tire and it's never convenient. It was like, it would be never convenient to have this conversation about like, hey man, I don't really know you anymore. What's going on? How are you? And I think we did it because maybe we believe that we want to make music for not just this next year, but for, you know, decades. That's the goal, is to keep this intact so that music can be good. But it takes a lot of, like any relationship, anyone who's been in them will tell you, it takes, you have to want to be in the relationship to have a relationship. So it takes a lot of maintenance and checking in.
Is there one checking in during the recording of this album that has been important? Maybe a certain song that you tried to write, or maybe a lyric that you spoke about, or maybe a certain memory that really made you connect again?
I think a lot of it had to do, we when we wrote the record, we were still, like, it was like we were clocking in and still surviving. So we were coming in the morning and leaving in the evening, like a 9 to 5. And that was pretty intense. And then once we got to the recording of the album separately, you know, not from the writing, I think that's when we began to realize we needed to talk. And so we would go on we were in Woodstock, and we would just go on these walks and just kind of hash things out and just say things, I think, that were, there were levels of honesty that maybe, you know, even if we wanted to, we probably wouldn't have had those conversations on the road, because you're so depleted, it doesn't make sense to have those. So I think we felt a little bit like ready to communicate, and, you know.
What was, I don't know if you want to talk about, but the last question about the subject, what was the best thing that he said to you, and vice versa? Or is it too personal? Can be, of course, but
I mean, it's personal for sure. I think, nothing even specific though stands out. It's just that it was the process of doing that, like being able to argue or fight or whatever you want to call it, and then go back in the studio and be like, let's work, the chorus is too slow, or let's add some, like, you know, I think feeling reconnected to each other, I think that was important. And it's like I think every band goes through it, and either they do break up or they continue on. And
I remember there was a moment where we were working for almost 3 weeks straight with no break, and we had this sort of weird conversation, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, do you want to go home for a couple of days, you know? And it's like, yeah. And I was like, it became apparent that like that would be really good to do, but our past would have been like, no, you stay here and you work. And you know, we changed our way, and I think that refreshed the whole thing. So it was like just trying to be less, I don't know, hardcore about and rigid about everything, and like try to listen to each other. That was an example of like, I think it helped make the record what it was. And then something like, there's a song called Angela on the record that is, it was almost written entirely in the studio. We were hitting record and recording the moment when the chorus was written. So we can go back and find, I really want to hear that. But we don't really generally do a whole lot of writing in the studio. It's more like fine-tuning things. And I don't think we could have done that if we weren't, you know, back on the same page with each other. You know, so I think it kind of, us doing that probably allowed Angela to be on the record in a weird way, and then Angela kind of rounds out the record in a way that if I didn't know, it affected it so profoundly. I don't think it's the same record without it, and so I just felt like it was part of the process, you know, that every band probably hopefully hashes things out, or if they don't, it kind of can.
Yeah. A certain song I would like to discuss is Gun Song. What triggered this song?
Well, Gun Song, my dad passed away, and then in the midst of all that, in 2007. And so I was living at home and making music with Jer in our hometown of Ramsey, and I was running late for work. I needed socks. I ran into his room because I knew he had clean black socks, and I was out, and I knew his clothes were still there. And I went to grab socks, and I grabbed a gun, like a pistol was in his sock drawer, and I didn't know that he had that. So that's what kind of sparked that was the impetus for the writing of the song. It was just sort of, my mind started to spin, and I had to make it to work on time still, so I was driving to work thinking about this, and it soon became a song.
And there is a lyric, I don't have a sweetheart, but if I did, I'd break my neck. Is it from your perspective or someone else's perspective? Or?
Well, I think that's what I like about the song, is because each verse, it takes this really strange 90-degree turn, where the next line is, I'd break my neck, and this is to please her, make her stay in my arms, she'd rest. Make her want to stay in my arms, she'd rest. It's like this idea of, you think it's bad, but it's actually good. I would go out of my way. I'd do everything I possibly could to try to make someone feel loved, you know. And in the first verse, it says, I don't own a single gun, but if I did, you'd be the one. Like as if I'm going to kill that person. It's like to hold it, aim it, make all the bad men run. That's my dad, for me, protecting me, you know, with that gun. But in the beginning, it sounds kind of negative. Yeah. And so each time you're going, and then you make a left turn. Yeah. And I was fascinated by that idea that you could lead someone lyrically down a path, and then all of a sudden just flip it, and it all could still make sense.
Was it a sad feeling for you that your dad passed away before you had the success with this band, or?
I guess it goes without saying. I guess, yeah, he was kind of like a hero to me. He was proud of me anyway. So he expressed that, and we had a nice way of doing that. So he was sick for a little while, and we knew it was coming, so we had some conversations. So I think he had a lot of stage fright, so I think he would have been really nervous just watching, just even watching. I remember him coming to small shows in New York and being like, I don't know how you're my son, I don't know how you're doing this, because it's the last place he'd ever want to be, is the stage. He's a very shy, private person.
Maybe because of that,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. In some ways, I was very much like him.
Last question. The album is called Cleopatra. It's also a song on the album. Does it mean that this is a more important song for you? Or?
I think it means that it is an important song on the album, and then I think it's sort of a cornerstone, like Ophelia was. We could have just as easily called the album Ophelia, or Angela. There's this trinity of women on this record or women's names that, for some reason, that's just how it worked out. But I think it covers a long, kind of epic story about this woman, and it's told from her perspective. So I think naming it Cleopatra was just, it's so much built into that name. It's a loaded archetype kind of name that it felt like it was doing what I wanted it to do with just one word that a lot of other names couldn't really provoke in me or evoke.
So these women, Ophelia, Cleopatra, and they are essentially the same woman, or?
No, it's just how it worked out. I don't know how. Like, Ophelia is just felt right musically. Cleopatra is an idea of this youthful indestructibility on the album, and then Angela, I think it's again an example of something that's just felt right musically. It could have been Los Angeles. It's a long time coming. It's just the idea, the sounds just felt right, but Angela felt the most right.
No, but you said there was a story, but I thought it was a continuing story about
a thread of women. Yeah.
Last question: How do you stay connected now?
We do lots of interviews now.
No, I mean when you tour this album.
Well, I think we're just trying to communicate even about how we tour, even about what our personal limits are, and just try to look out for each other. It's not a competitive thing. It's like we're just trying to support this record and support each other. So a lot of it is just, hey man, it's okay if you don't want to do this, but you just, like, we have to be more open, I think, in the beginning and not just be surviving. So, and I think our schedule and stuff has allowed us to be more human beings on the road and not just like these, sort of moles that go inside and then come out for the show and then go back underground, So I think I got to see a lot of Amsterdam the past couple of days, for example. That's something I probably never even came close to doing on the last record. It sounds silly, but it was only until the end of the album cycle of 3 years was I even getting to see cities because of how busy we were and how exhausted we were. So that alone makes me feel pretty happy, and I think that each of us being happy helps.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.